Hello, everybody. Sacha here. I hope you're all well. So, the time has come for me to tell a little story about why it's been so difficult for me to tell my truth and move forward in my blog and in my journal and in my story, what came to pass and what happened back when I became a page three model and how that process worked. What has come to pass since trying to talk about my page three days, I can only imagine was all meant to be. It's not been easy, and I have wrote a blog out. I'm just going to read it and and let you know how I feel about all of this. I do believe that sharing our true life stories helps heal ourselves and and others by sharing our stories in all kinds of spiritual and magical ways. And this particular story has only been made hard for me when, to begin with, the realization of how it had all happened, what happened, and who and what I am talking about really sunk in for me. As an activist for standing up for the Me Too movement since 2020 and speaking up about sexual harassment on the dance floor and misogyny, unconscious bias against the feminine, and the abuse of power, I feel strongly that we should all be able to talk about our experiences, but I never realized how hard it was going to turn out to be for me. So on the 27th of July, 2023, just over a year ago, I published a blog article on my radio website, on the iStream radio website, and it was called From a City Broker to Page 3 Girl. And it's the story of how I became a glamour model in the late 1990s, and it is available on the iStream website. I'll put the link in below. Within it is a shocking account of a meeting with a publication owner, as I put it, which was actually my entry and induction into the world of glamour modeling. I now know this man to be the gatekeeper to the sordid world of porn, and that his mansion house that I arrived at that day completely unprepared for was coined in 2016 by the Daily Mail, no less, as the house that porn built. I've told what happened when I ended up at that house to many of my close friends since that day. I actually told my boyfriend and female best friend that very evening, not because I was proud of it or to glory about it, because it was all just so shocking to me and astounding as to what had happened and how it had all gone down. I'll never forget it. And now I remember it all so vividly, much more since I published my blog. But having given up full-time modeling in 2000 and moved into working in the dance music industry since then, before that, I hadn't really given that period of my life much thought in a very long time. So it was at the end of 2021, while retreating from the clown world and the COVID pandemic dramas and dealing with some hardcore family abuse, grief, tragedy, and the death of my brother-in-law, the coronial inquest process that went on afterwards, and everything else, and trying to cope with just hideously traumatic events, that I started journaling again. I retreated from the madness and immersed in my own self-healing child work in a child work journey. And I started writing out some of my life stories. I've always loved reading and writing. I'm a right little bookworm, as you can see my bookshelf behind. And writing my thoughts and feelings and troubles out on paper has always been really therapeutic for me. I've known that. I've spent many days and nights scribbling away in notebooks trying to work my roller coaster life out. And I've always found that putting the words out onto paper gets them out of my head onto the paper, and then they're out, even if nobody sees them. So it was only once I'd wrote out this particular story and then read it to my husband that I started to really think about it all. And he was fairly shocked by the whole thing. Now looking back at the age of 50 at what actually happened and having learned all I have now and what I realize and understand now when looking back and seeing it with adult eyes, I realize how serious this incident all was, how dangerous a position I was put in, and how lucky I was to escape with my dignity intact, just about. It was only once I wrote out this story that I realised that this meeting was an attempt by a very powerful, mega rich man to groom me. I did not know him previously to that, and he tried to coerce and put pressure on me into having sex with him to sexually gratify him in exchange for making me one of his special friends, is what he offered. That's how he put it. And as one of those special friends, he would then give me fame and fortune and a double page spreads across his newspapers as long as I gave him a blowjob at the very least. Obviously, he wanted more than that. And then it was blowjob, not even, which was utterly shocking to me as to how blatant he was. I'd literally just walked into his house for a casting and I was completely unprepared. Anybody that's seen his house, it is a mental mansion. Fortunately, I managed to escape his bedroom without being physically harmed. But I was 24, a strong-willed and seriously feisty, and he could see I was ready to fight him off. He could see he was asking for trouble with me. I wasn't going to play ball. And when I realised he'd locked his bedroom door and he turned nasty on me, he could see I was not going to give him what he wanted without a serious fight. And even though I'm small, he is smaller. Thank God. He was clearly used to young, impressionable, and more vulnerable girls that he could either intimidate, bribe, or overpower to do whatever he wanted far easier. And he did say that by not putting out, I was going to be doing it the hard way. As he said, that's in his opinion, maybe. And I would like to say that no, I am very glad that I did manage to escape and was not forced into anything as others may have been. He advertised as liking them to be just 16 in the sport, just turned a sweet 16. If they were in the paper at that age, then they must have been even younger when going through the same initiation induction process at his house that I did. Many, many girls, they were all mostly younger than me. I got out, and remarkably, for whatever reason, he did still give me work immediately. He made me strip of the week in the sport. And I then became a sport model. And after that, I found out it was well known what he was like. I still didn't quantify it in the way I do now. But looking back, I'm like, oh my God. All the girls knew, all the girls in the studios that had got that far knew that if they wanted any plastic surgery, a boob job, anything, then it was off to his house for getting it for free and for some extra press, and that he would have a meeting with them. I didn't realize who he was back then or any of his connections. I didn't quantify his power or any of it. I was still naive, really, myself, despite thinking I was all grown up, having left home 8 years prior to that. But I still had no real comprehension. But you think you can take the world on in your 20s, don't you? Well, I did anyway. Sadly, I now realise that this initiation process was his modus operandi. I have come to know that one that has fed his sexual gratification desires, and that has gone on to put many girls into porn and prostitution, and he has made billions out of it. This is exploitation at its worst in plain sight. Without the girls he has used and abused, he would have nothing. No empire, no big house, no football teams, nothing. Yes, we can talk about consent all day, but there's also underage and coercive control, and consent and grooming needs to be understood in these situations. So after discussing, back to my blog, and after discussing putting this blog out and reading it through with my husband, in April 2022, I contacted a couple of journalists to ask them their thoughts on publishing my account and my story. It wasn't just about this, it was my whole kind of what happened as I became a page-3 model. But due to this particular account, then nobody wanted to publish it. And I was like, well, how can I take this out? This is how I became a page-3 model. So I spoke to someone at The Guardian and TM Media, and they both said that they weren't surprised on who the account in it was about. And the Guardian journalist was open with me and asked me if I knew of any other girls that had similar stories, and that said that he would be able to consider publishing it only if it had at least 3 girls coming forward. And even then, it can take years due to the threat of defamation lawsuits, money being no object, etc., etc. This seems to be a theme with these kind of high-powered people that have done wrong and feel like they can get away with it forever. I know how dangerous it is to name and shame him, anybody in power, but that cannot be a reason why we are stopped from exercising our free speech. Defamation by truth is, you can't, it is not defamation, it's just my true story of what's happened and my opinions, and I am entitled to those. I now know from experience over the last 4 years also how police are failing to protect us all from so much crime, and especially sexual crimes and predators, and that also blackmail and corruption in society is rife, especially in the police. There's many police that have got an awful lot of delvings in the porn and prostitution world for whatever reason. There's so many cover-ups, backhanders, people on the payroll everywhere. We need to talk about these things to change them. However, back then, at that time, I didn't feel strong enough to publish it on my own, so I left it. However, a year later, in July 23, I published that blog when feeling stronger. But I censored it and edited it myself, taking out the name of this person and the name of the newspaper that he owned. As soon as I published it, various people started contacting me immediately. Despite my censorship, due to this man's notorious and well-known method of grooming and his modus operandi, others recognised who I was talking about, and I was sent this link. A Metro newspaper Premier League boss is probed by police over alleged rape of a teenager. That's when it all really started to sink in. I started getting flashbacks of being in his bedroom and the heavy realization of the true danger I'd been in, what the intention was, and worst, what he had allegedly done to so many other girls before me and since. At first, I felt really bad. And what if I'd said something earlier? Could I have stopped more girls' fate at the hands of this vile man? I was then contacted by a BBC journalist and one of his alleged victims. I secretly found out that the BBC had been investigating for a couple of years already, and this was a year ago, over a year ago. So I then went and did my research and realised how active and prominent he still is. he is another Epstein-esque character. There's no doubt about this, and he does still think he can get away with it and not even talk about it like Jimmy Savile did. So this was a year ago, and after speaking to what feels like every journalist since putting out my blog from every major UK press publication, on the 11th of June this year, when there was still nobody actually able to name him and say, look, what is going on here and why can't we talk about this? I'd had enough. I just want to put my story out. Um, a lot has gone on in the last year. Not everything I am allowed to talk about, again, for legal reasons, but I am allowed to tell my story. So I put out a tweet on the 11th of June. This is the tweet. And I didn't even say anything, really. It went a bit viral, and obviously he and his people saw it, and his response was an immediate slap, which is a strategic lawsuit against a public participation, threatens of imprisonment and this kind of thing. So I do not take kindly to that. That is a big mistake. Um, we are allowed to talk about these things, and money shouldn't be a reason to stop us. So he is now 75. He is the Pawn King of the UK. He is the ex-owner and still shareholder of the sport newspaper group. He is the current chairman of West Ham United. And so much money over his has come off the immoral earnings of selling and degrading women into porn and prostitution, and for the other things that he has done personally. His name is David Sullivan, and I do name him and exercise my right to free speech. This is a democracy, and I will not be intimidated by his threats. He should be named, and it should be discussed for the good of the public interest, in the public interest. And that is why I do it now. I feel I have no choice. I want to move on with my life as well. And I have spent so much time on this with so many journalists and everything. It is ridiculous, and I cannot stay silent anymore. He needs to be tried and discuss his potential crimes and the truth of how he has coerced and thousands of women into pornography and prostitution since the 70s be told. I dread to think how many children, adults have suffered because of him. How can I or any of us sit by and let this continue and stay silent? I believe he is, in my opinion, one of the main root causes of why many of men have been raised on porn and how it has been normalized. Porn has been normalized. I went into Pg3 modeling saying I can model my figure. I never wanted to sell my body for sex, and I never have. I've been tempted when you've been that hard, but I never had kids to feed and these kind of things. So I I wasn't driven to that. But I do believe that his hardcore porn empire has fed into the minds of millions. It has. Millions of men, especially. This gets them hooked on hookers. A never-ending porn cycle addiction, because porn and harder porn becomes an addiction, leading to abuse and sometimes rape of women and men. So can we please start dealing with where all of this content is coming from? This particular man, um, he is one small man, and why should we be scared of talking about him? I was the one that got away. And possibly this is why I am able to talk about things. But the truth of everything that has gone on is apparent, and the FA, West Ham, and many people are away, is the Football Association, are the West Ham um, staff and everybody at West Ham and the fans really okay with knowing that this character is still in power and that his millions and billions have all come from sex shops, massage parlors, sex lines, sex websites, porn films, and the overall degradation and prostitution of thousands of women for sexual services since the 70s. These are the daughters of so many fathers and mothers in the world, and they have been treated like whores that are worth nothing more than sexual objects. Is this the message that we want to continue to send to the women of the world through football? Uh, that women want a man to love them, protect them, and respect them deep down. Many have been programmed into feeling that sex is the only way to have any power in this world, and that is not right. And the objectification and sexualization of children um, has been so normalized, it needs to stop. I'm not blaming him for everything, but this particular situation can go on no longer. Uh, I've thought long and hard about speaking out, and I simply cannot stay silent about all of this anymore. Everything I say is true. It's not defamation. I'm not scared of being sued by a multi-billionaire. I've got nothing to lose, unlike him, financially. And the quicker this all comes to court and is dealt with, the better for us all. I do believe in justice. And let's all talk, please. Truth matters. We have to fight for the change we all want to see. We have to stand up for every person that has suffered. Uh, the hands of this man, their flashbacks, their trauma is of magnitude that nobody wants to comprehend. And I will do my best to support them all the way to truth, accountability, and justice. Thank you for listening. I will continue to talk. God knows what's going to happen and the implications, but I can only do what I can do and tell my truth and move forward. That is it. And I will put out my blog and be talking about my days in the glamour industry and everything I learned from it, from that period of my life and everything that went on after that particular meeting. Some may say that I got into pastry and I should be happy I was a pastry girl and that was it. But, and yeah, I was. Um, it wasn't something I was aspiring to be. It gave me for a small amount of time, some of the attention that obviously we all do crave. We all need to feel wanted. Um, but it taught me an awful lot. And everything that went on after that, everything that I learned, and everything that has come to pass recently, I know what the sex industry is like, and I know why it needs to be talked about. So yeah, that's it from me right now. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna go and pour myself a drink. It's after that. Fuck knows what's gonna happen, but it's just all got to be said, and I cannot stay silent anymore. I am breaking the silence. Thank you.